really good to see people enthusiastic and coming to the course. I've been coming to the course maybe for 10 years, and so I've had a great opportunity to see how the course has developed, and this year is fantastic. You have Timothy Ray Brown, he's a great guy, and you have many interesting lectures. So the first thing you may notice is that I am speaking in English, I think. Now, talvez eu vou falar com vocês em português, mas I think it is better for you and for me if I speak in English with you. So I want to remind everyone and prepare you that you have to adjust your ears to English for these strange estrangeiros who are going to come and talk to you. Now, some of the speakers will talk extremely quickly and you won't understand anything they say. But I don't understand what they say either. So it's very helpful to have the slides. And I hope Camilla and others will remind Esper to remind the lecturers to speak clearly and distinctly. Some lectures may be given in Portuguese, I'm not sure. They're entertaining. But it's a real pleasure to be here. I think, as all of you know, the people who come here, we volunteer our time, and are just impressed with the students. Before I start talking, I also wanted to tell people about an observation that I have made over the course of these times I've been down here. And I have observed that students who ask questions are the ones that end up with postdoctoral positions in the country of their choice. And I have seen a lot of people who have come through this course who have successfully been accepted into programs in Europe, United States, and Canada. And that comes from interactions with the visiting speakers. So I would very much encourage anyone who's interested in spending some time outside of your beautiful country to talk to people, to prepare what you want to say, to find people in the coffee break, to find people at their lectures. I know from experience that it is difficult to ask questions in front of everyone else, but try, if you have a question, then try, and you'll be surprised how people react well to that. So that was just my tip. So I know that it's getting late in the afternoon. I'm going to do two things. Those of you who are on the course last year will get a refresher, a reminder, and those who are new, hopefully there will be some value for this. So I'm first of all going to talk about how to organize and put together a manuscript, and then I'm going to ask for some assistance and will demonstrate how I think you can maximize your opportunity at a poster session. So I'm hoping you're getting used to my voice by now. I've got a British accent, as you can tell, but I'm actually in New York City at Cornell Medical School. And because I've only recently moved to Cornell, I wanted to just tell you about our university. We're a well-established American university. We have 3 campuses. Our main campus is up in New York, upstate. It's a large undergraduate and graduate campus, very beautiful. I work at Weill Cornell Medicine. It was called Weill Cornell because Sandy Weill, who owned Citibank, it's a bit like someone who would own Banco do Brasil, gave a lot of money, so he got his name for the medical school. But on this island in Manhattan called Roosevelt Island, there was a brand new part of our university called Cornell Tech. And this is an exciting venture where you have people who talk about deep learning and machine learning and coding, and they walk around in this sort of haze of brilliance. So they're quite fun to talk to. So we're starting to ask questions related to machine learning and HIV infection, for example. So the nice thing about our medical school is we're right next to one of the best known cancer hospitals in the country, in the United States, Sloan Kettering, and we're also next door to Rockefeller University. So we are part of what's called the tri-institutional complex for medical research. Those of you who were here last year may remember my colleague Brad Jones, and we both were recruited to Cornell and started in July. This is our research building. It is a beautiful building. It's got all sorts of fun things. In it is an amazing place to work. We have these sort of comfortable lounges and places to sit around. These are some of my people unpacking. And now we have quite a group. We also have had some people in the audience I recognize who've visited us and worked in our lab. So I'm now going to talk about how to put a manuscript together. And you may say, well, why do I need to know how to... I know how to tell a story, but there's actually a formula to putting these manuscripts together. And it's important for scientists like yourselves to know how to write a manuscript. And so I think that one of the things we try and teach our students, and so I'm going to help you here, is to really think about how you can structure putting a manuscript together. So there's always the beginning. You sort of have this in your mind, you want to write something. And the way that I think most of us do that is you just scribble on a piece of paper or type these days anything that comes to your mind. What are you going to write about? How are you going to put it together? Just anything. Conclusions first, methods next. Just any order, but just get something down. And then what I do, I'm always someone who can work for about 15 minutes or 30 minutes, and then I have to do something, and I usually go and get a cafezinho. You can have a lot of cafezinhos. And then, since I'm an obsessive news junkie, I will also go to Globo or Noticias. I've actually been trying to follow the Barcelona-Manchester United match, which is not going well so far, for those of you who are interested. If you're a Barcelona fan, you're happy. So then what you're really beginning to do is to create a scaffold. And there's actually quite a lot of resources that are available on the web for you to also learn how to do this. And the first place to start is when you've picked your journal, is to look at the instructions for authors. And they will often tell you the order in which they wish to see a manuscript with different headings, sections, and so on. But the nice thing about this is that by writing it down or typing it out, you've already started a paper. And I usually tell my postdocs that in 15 minutes they can write 15 pages. And they look at me like that's completely crazy. But it's easy because you just put page number and you can do 1 to 15. It takes about a minute. And then you can do title, and then you can do abstract, and then you can do introduction and methods and results and conclusions, references, figure legends, tables. You've got a paper. I mean, there's nothing in it, but it's started. So I think that is absolutely enough to go and get a latte. That's my thing. So then sort of putting on a Harry Potter sorting hat, you've got all this stuff, and wouldn't it be nice if magically it could all be written for you? But you can write it by just putting the different sections together, your background, what's going to go in the background, what's in the results, what's in the discussion. And then it's sort of good to put in sort of fragment sentences. And the way that I like to do this, I say to people, well, they say, I don't know how to start. And I say, well, that's easy, because don't start where you want to start, but start at the end. Start wherever you have some inspiration. and then you can put that into its order later. So it's really just providing yourself a scaffold. What do you want to say? And then gradually you can fill this out. And the other thing that I recommend to people to do is to set yourself a deadline. If you've got a body of work that you think is going to be written into a paper, say, I'm going to finish this draft in 2 weeks. And how do you do that? Well, you have to work on it every day. You have to say, I'm going to work on my paper 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever you can put into it. But you know, we're scientists and we do experiments. It's really just a different experiment. And then you might want to say, well, have I really got all the literature? And as a reviewer, including a reviewer for some high impact journals, one of the things that we're always looking out for is the quality of the way that people reference an article. So that is considered to be a benchmark for someone to understand the history of the field. And so what I often do is say, well, I think I know it, but let's go to EndNote and just look around the EndNote library and make sure that I'm not missing any major piece or minor piece, because there are some reviewers I know, because I'm also an editor, who will reject your manuscript because you put their name and their paper later on than someone else's. And you think, you know, this is pretty silly, but people say you've got to know the history. So referencing is actually pretty important. So then your figures. I think it's often a place you've got these interesting results. You've probably already started to put them into some type of order. Figures, tables, boxes. What is the display material that you want to show? But it's actually also at this stage that it's really pretty important to check what your formatting is, because it can be a complete pain to find that you have put your figures in the wrong format. And each journal has got different requirements. How many minor ticks on your axis? What size fonts? How do they look like? So just do your homework. And in the meantime, you're thinking about that discussion, because the discussion is the hard bit. Introduction is easy, background. You can do your methods. You can do the methods in sleep. The results, they're your results. They're exciting. But how do you put it all together? The discussion is sort of really the tricky one. Then you go for a run, because you need things to distract yourselves. So what about the introduction? So again, introductions are often already written, because at least in the United States, we often are putting in grants for funding, which actually have the introduction there. It's not a publication. It can come out of the grant and into your paper. You may also have information proposals. So it's really the introduction does not have to be brand new. You just have to bring yourself to where the story started. And I think that the introduction is really the promise to your reader. It's the first thing someone's going to read, so you have to make it interesting. You have to get people excited. Why have you done this work? What's exciting about it? And often you tease people at the end of the introduction by telling them what you're going to tell them. And that's a standard method that's also true in presentation styles, is you tend to always keep on coming back to the message. What is the message of your paper? If you're lucky, someone's going to read your abstract. These days, there are so many papers. You have to get people interested so that they'll read your introduction. So I think when I read the best papers, they are almost like beautiful phrases put together. People have spent a lot of time thinking about these. Now, this is difficult in any language. It's doubly difficult if English isn't your first language and you're working for an English journal. But you probably know people who are native English speakers and use them, to say, hey, can you go over this, make sure that it reads well. So don't send out a paper in English before getting it checked. So what do you put in the introduction? Well, it's short. I mean, I think people who write very, very long introductions, that's really not the place. An introduction is short because you're excited to get to the results, right? You want to know the results. You've got this little introduction, it says, poof, and so you want to get there. So keep it quite short. You have to describe the background. You have to describe why you're doing the study, why your findings are relevant, and if you're feeling really gutsy, you can say, and this is a major new contribution to the field. Sometimes people don't like that, and you have to be honest with yourself. Is what you've done a major contribution to the field? Hopefully it is. And then you will put in sort of this roadmap of what the reviewer or reader is going to find in the paper. So again, just to remind you, write the way you speak. Be economical. You don't want to be burdened down by a lot of words. No pois now, pois seguinte, all these sort of filler words that we like to use here in Brazil. So just keep the language sharp. There are some funny phrases when we're looking at papers that you have to be a bit careful about. So you can say, it has long been known, and you don't put a reference, and that means you didn't look up the original reference. You can say a definite trend is evident. Is that you really want to be showing stuff that's statistically significant. So we read this as these data are practically meaningless. And then you have these pontificating phrases of great theoretical and practical importance. Well, that sort of might be interesting to you, but not to everyone else. So I also like to read things aloud. I think it's helpful. You can choose to do that. You can choose to do that by yourself or in front of others. But you have to make it sound, you have to read it and say, well, I would like to read that. That's enough. So write the easy parts first. That's what I always do. Just try and get rid of those. It fills up those 15 pages and it makes you feel happy you're doing something. So doing the methods, results, they're usually the ones that do first. You need to be careful about the methods. People now are paying a lot of attention to the methods. If any of you have recently had a paper in one of the nature journals, you will know that they have, once you have your paper accepted, then the trouble starts because they ask you for the clone number of everything you use, and you have to verify and document everything. So it actually is really important to keep track of everything that you're doing, of course, in the lab. So then the results section discussion, you've got your list, what do you want to say, why do you think your results are exciting? I'm going to be talking tomorrow morning and showing you some brand new data that we've been generating that I think is absolutely phenomenally exciting. So I'm going to try tomorrow to get you excited and sort of think back to this in relation to how you would write the paper. So is it an expected or unexpected finding? What's new? Build up your case. Is it something that's confirming things that people knew, or is it taking a leap into something unknown? Are you lucky enough to be trying to transform a long-held belief? Are there any implications of your results for policy, social policy? Could there be something useful that might be of pragmatic clinical value? I think we work in basic science, but we want to help cure people or stop people becoming infected. And so we have our basic science to our clinical output, and keep that in mind. So in the discussion, I would say speak to the reader. It's like you want to speak to one of your colleagues and tell them what you found. You have to argue the case with your facts from your results section. I like to do, what's your idea, what's the analysis, what you conclude from that, and you can repeat that several times. And then you also have to make sure that the paragraphs fit together one against the next, and you're connecting the dots for the readers. It's just leading people through this. How would you just style your discussion? You start with your topic sentences, you follow the idea, the topic, the analysis, what you've actually done, and the concluding sentence. So this is sort of an easy way to you don't forget everything that you want to put down. So if you're stuck, go back. Is that topic worthwhile doing the whole finding? Sometimes when you're putting your paper together, you realize that you've got enough material for another paper. That's quite exciting. And you can pull it out. Or sometimes you realize you don't have enough material for a paper, and then you can choose to do more experiments, or you can say, well, maybe this could be a correspondence, this could be a short report, this could be a brief paper, not a full paper. Sometimes you don't know that until you do that. Now, the peer review system, where we send our papers off and experts, or sometimes experts, will be reading your paper. It's an anonymous system normally. You have to try and think about what they're going to criticize. And so you have to really try and be explaining everything that you do and anticipate what people might critique. So you'll often see in papers the limitations of our study are blah, 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 because if you acknowledge your limitations up front, it shows the reviewer that you are thinking that your study has got potential challenges which need to be addressed, and you are doing that. But you shouldn't really be having a confidence crisis now. You should have thought all of this out before you actually started the experiments. And then you want to conclude with something interesting. Conclusion is not a repetition. You want to set a course for what's coming next. What is your next step? What's your research agenda? Have you produced something that you think is going to get people interested in that area? If you've made some interesting findings, create a controversy. And some practical advice. Go back to the instructions for authors. They're really very, very helpful. I still like hard copies. I still print paper. Maybe that's I'm on the older side, so I don't do everything on my phone. Not sure right. I've never written a paper on a phone yet, so that will be a new experience. But I like paper. It makes me feel that I've got something. Read it out loud. Use a pen. Get others to read it. You're always going to find some errors. When you've done all this, then there's that funny thing called spelling and grammar, which you can set to English and run spell check, run grammar, run it by people who are native English speakers. And then wait. Just have a pause, reread it. And then, important, you have to send it to your co-authors. Don't forget to send your paper to the other authors that you've written this with. And it's amazing. Sometimes in the past, I have read papers that I have never seen that appear in PubMed. That's not a good idea, and certainly shouldn't be happening these days. The other tip is that when you're putting a paper together, I like to have suggested title and suggested authors and order. Because if you have a suggested title, it means that that title can be changed by someone without too much aggravation. And if you have suggested authors and order, it also allows some flexibility of authorship order. And these days, that's less controversial because we have more opportunity of using co-first authors or co-senior authors. Co-middle authors is coming. But suggested authors, suggested order, it just helps when it goes around to your co-authors. For those who are working with NIH grants, there's a public policy, and we are encouraged to submit papers to public access. I approve of that because that means that everyone can get access instead of having to pay through a firewall. But there is a requirement for our research that is funded to do this. And then there are certain things when you submit the paper and you have it accepted, you have to do in relation to compliance, and that probably is true in Brazil as well. So I'm going to stop there, and that is for the writing the manuscript. And now I'm going to ask for the helpers to come up and bring the poster up into the center of the stage. And while they're doing that, are there any questions on the manuscript compartment? Oh, they're very good. This changed from George Washington University to Weill Cornell as I was speaking. The only one thing is there's 2 L's for those, but that's pretty impressive, right? You know, it's like suggested location. Okay. So now we're going to change to something different. So I'm hoping that many of you have got posters and will be presenting to invited guests and your colleagues at the poster session. And this is something that people don't normally teach you. But I'm going to try and teach you a little bit about how to present a poster, because this is your opportunity to interact in a fun way with people who are interested in your research. And it's also your opportunity to interact with someone that you want to interact with. So if you want to interact with Adrian McDermott, for example, he's one of the lecturers on the course. He's a really great guy. He was a postdoc of mine a few years ago. He's gone on to great things. Very friendly, nice person, great person to work with. Okay, so you decide you want to work with Adrian. Say in your mind, I want to work in Adrian McDermott's lab. How can I get Adrian to be interested? Well, the first thing is you could say to Adrian, you know, in the coffee break, Adrian, could you come and listen to my poster? That's sort of like, uh-oh, you've already pulled the lever, right? Adrian's going to come to your poster. So when you have the poster, then the first important thing of a poster session is actually to be at your poster. That may sound stupid, right? But if you don't stand by your poster and someone comes to see it and you're not there, you're not going to have that fantastic interaction with Adrian McDermott. He's going to say, next person. So the next thing is that it is, of course, too late to change your poster. And you hope that the poster is surviving. Some posters somehow get ripped up, and so make sure you get your poster out in advance so it doesn't look a mess. This is a nice looking poster, but you also realize that we stretch from here down to there. So in your mind, you have to think, where does someone who's coming to see your poster want to see most? So most of the people who are visiting know the background. So you want to be very quick on the background. And you might want to say, I'd like you to go to these results because I find them particularly interesting. And I find them interesting because here we have a statistically significant difference between Zika acute and Zika convalescence. And when I got that result, I then thought, I better look at these CD8 responses in a bit more detail. And I found that actually there was the CD8 response directed to the NS2A. And that leads me to think that if we're thinking about a Zika or dengue vaccine, then we might need to specifically target these. So my conclusions are, so this, I haven't seen this poster before, but it's, thank you for volunteering it. But I think the point is that you want to realize that people know a lot about the background, so you don't have to spend a lot of time on the background. The other thing that you may find people do, Adrian's a busy guy. Like me, he needs to get to the bar for a beer, right? And so if you need to get to the bar, what do you say to people? You say, can you give me the 2-minute version of your poster? And if you're not prepared for the 2-minute version of your poster, then but I've spent a year doing all of this. I'm going to spend 6 months telling you what I've done. No, you've got 2 minutes. 2 minutes. So you need to have a 2-minute version of your poster, and you could say, and sometimes people will say to you, "Give me the 2-minute version," and then the alternative is you can say, "Do you want the 2-minute version?" Wow, she knows how to summarize everything in 2 minutes. You can also give yourself a 5-minute version, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to be going through this and saying, well, this is like this, and then this is like this, because people just don't have the time for that. And you want to be able to summarize. It's like writing a paper, but put in a poster format. It's what are the important things that you've done. So the nice thing here is that you've got this aims. So you might say, are you familiar with Zika virus? And someone might say, yeah, I know all about Zika virus. In which case, you can just go straight to the methods and what you did. Or someone might say, no, Zika virus is not really my field. Tell me a little bit more about it. So you have to be picking up on the clues. And it's sort of that interpersonal interaction that's important in any part of life. But in science, when you're defending your poster, you have to be keeping your eyes like this. Who's interested in your poster? You can also try and encourage people to come over to your poster. You can sort of, yeah, would you like to know about my poster? They don't really want to know about your poster, but once you've said that, it's sort of do it. And the other thing you notice is that sometimes you have posters, and there are a lot of people looking at the posters, and people like this, and you think, there must be something interesting about that poster. And posters accumulate people, and then sometimes you have people who don't. So you can get one of your friends to be your poster dummy, and you can say, hey, can you kind of just wander around my poster to make sure that it looks like someone's looking at my poster? Sort of draw people in. Because you want to make an impression, and you want to talk to as many people as possible. And if you have, it's good to have friends, and it's good to have friends. So if you have decided that you want to have Adrian McDermott look at your poster, you can have your friend tracking Adrian McDermott and sort of pushing him towards it in a sort of nice way. These are tricks of posters that are effective. You want to be able to tell people about your exciting research, because you're proud of it. This is a very interesting, I've already read it. It's a very interesting study. You've got a lot of things going on here that you might want to do next. So in addition to talking about the poster, someone might say to you, well, that's very interesting, but what are you going to do next? And it's really good to have thought of that. And it's really bad if you say, I don't know. That is if you want a job with Adrian McDermott, you need to know what you do next. And that's, of course, part of the fun of science, because you get to a certain point and then you publish it, but that doesn't stop. Things move on. So it's making sure you put your poster up, making sure you stand by the poster. In advance, trying to work out if there's specific people you want to come and hear your poster, and then try and find them earlier, and then try and make sure that you spot them or your friends spot them and they're drawn over to this. Think about how much background does someone really need. Some people need nothing. They're just interested in the results. So you have to judge what people... Have 2 minutes. Practice it. This is your 2-minute talk. Maximum 5. And you don't want to be someone who is keeping someone at your poster too long. You want to send them off with, well, this is what we think, this is our conclusion, and this is what we're going to do next. And then you could also say, do you have any suggestions? Because it's a perfect opportunity to get your results reviewed. everyone who comes to this course reviews for many different journals. It is quite likely that we have reviewed some of your papers. And so this is a perfect opportunity to try and understand that and to try and get feedback. And then the other thing is potentially leave your contact information, your email, if you have a card, if you've got, if people seem interested, say, well, maybe I could follow up with you. Maybe I could talk to you a bit more about this, particularly if someone seems interested in what your results are. So I think that's enough. It's the pre-day. You've got some really fun and interesting lectures coming up over the next few days. It's a lot of intense concentration, I know that. But I think people have put effort into their talks, and certainly Timothy Ray Brown, who I've been fortunate to get to know quite well, is a very generous and remarkable person. I mean, as the first person cured of HIV, he, of course, has a special place in history. But he has a very compelling story. And I would definitely encourage you to be that. But I would encourage you to come to as many things as possible. For those of you who have specific people you want to talk to, make out that list, practice your 2-minute talk, and good luck and enjoy the course. And thank you for doing this. Okay, thanks very much indeed.